I don't feel that enough people are discerning enough in their lives. And this most of the time is with themselves, right?
A lot of times I won't know the immediate solution, but I'm going to sit with it and think it through, and I can probably come up with a solution.
I do like how you talked about setting aside preconceived notions that you can't delegate up, right? Welcome back to I Can Fit That In, the show where ambition meets alignment. Today, I'm joined by Jon Van Gorp, who serves as chair of Mayer Brown, one of the world's leading law firms with a history dating back to the late 1800s. In addition to leading the firm, Jon is widely recognized as one of the foremost practitioners in structured finance, known not only for his technical expertise, but for his ability to solve complex problems with clarity and creativity. Over the course of his career, Jon has operated at the highest levels of leadership in a demanding and constantly evolving industry. And I'm excited to explore what he has learned about leadership, decision-making, and sustaining perspective along the way. Jon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Erin.
You're so welcome. So obviously that introduction, I know it has to be short and sweet, and there's way more to you as a person. But wow, as the chair of Mayer Brown, a top tier global law firm, I mean, you have stepped into an exceptionally highly ranked leadership role. And I love how you view this role as a way of really giving back to an institution that has given so much to you. Because I've heard you say this in some of the podcasts I've listened to you on. So can you walk us through that? Like, what's your leadership style, and what does that giving back really mean to you?
So for me, it's servant leadership, meaning you're here to be at the bottom of the org chart and empower the people that really make this place go on a day-to-day basis. And I really believe that. So I try to find ways to be useful every day. I try to lead by example in terms of how I approach each day and what I try to accomplish. But for me, it's all about empowerment of really motivated people to get them to be at their best. It's like a coaching position as opposed to a command and control position.
Okay, so that is so important. And I know it is something that a lot of executives are either toying with today or have been toying with when it comes to how they show up and how they lead. And you and I know this in some of the conversations we've even had already, but leadership for a long time was more about that kind of authoritative way of showing up and getting people
Right.
to work hard. So that doesn't work anymore. And you clearly know that, with servant leadership being the first thing out of your mouth, and empowering others and wanting others to be able to do their best. How would you say you create an environment where people are able to show up in that way for themselves?
To me, it's understanding that each person is unique and they have different things in life that motivate them, different challenges that they have to overcome.
Yeah.
Just like coaching a basketball team, there's different skill sets with different players. They play different positions. And as a leader, you have to be tuned into that. You have to know what makes each person tick and try your best to tap into that potential. For me, leadership is unlocking the potential in the people that you lead. And it's different for each person in terms of how you do that.
Yeah. And the more that everyone rises in your organization, the more that you rise, right? Not the opposite. What would you say, with kind of what I just mentioned, the way that leadership has evolved? What's a belief that you hold today around leadership that maybe you didn't 10, 15, 20 years ago?
For me, a belief I hold now about leadership is that it's absolutely critical to the success of an organization. And that comes from clients who tell me, I've got so many great business ideas, but not enough people to lead them. And so it's an under-recognized but rare skill that somebody can actually lead a group of people into doing something complicated and hard.
Yeah.
And I can understand why now after having this job, because it is difficult and it does take a lot of thought and patience. But if the world had more good leaders, we might be able to reach the potential that we have to invent cures for diseases and create more peaceful relations between countries and people, and unlock the secrets of life. It ultimately does make a big difference. And As I said, I see that with clients all the time. I see that here. And I have a great leadership team around me, and I constantly tell them how much of a difference they're making, because leadership really does matter.
Right, right. It reminds me of I'm not going to name firms or anybody, it wasn't a law firm, but there was a fairly sizable organization where I met with a new CEO, who was a regional CEO. And the long and short of it is he said to me, I've got these 5 people on my C-suite team that report into me. I've been here 6 months. I gave them these 5 initiatives that I want them to run with. And every month we get together and we talk about the progress we're making, and they're not really moving on anything. And so my
Right.
questions to him started with kind of the basics, honestly. At least to me, it was basic. But I asked him, well, let's talk about these people who report to you. And, for example, do they have children? What's their personal life like? Are they
Right.
married? Are they in a relationship? Tell me about these people. Okay. 2 men, 3 women, married, dating, whatever. So we go through it. And I learned that all 5 of them have children, varying ages, right? From young
Yeah.
to, they're empty nesting. So I said to him, okay, tell me the name of just one child out of all of their children, not one of each, just one child out of, the 15 kids. He could not name a single one, and he'd been there for 6 months. And I said, okay, so the
Yeah.
reason I believe, and I haven't talked to them yet, but the reason I believe they're not making progress on your initiatives is because they don't really trust you yet or think you care about them. So, what if you start to build a relationship with each of them? And how could that possibly help you move the needle on your initiatives? So, talk to me a little bit about that. I mean, how do you look at even just shaping the future, the next generation of leaders, and how getting to know people and actually caring about people matters?
It's a really good question. And you've got to realize that at different stages of their careers, people need different things. So we have people here that are just out of law school, late 20s. We have people here who are in their 70s. It's a multi-generational business for sure. And that does create complexities from a leadership perspective, because all of those groups of people need different things. Sometimes the younger talent base needs talent development more than anything else, and they come here for that. And that's important to them. The mid-career people may be looking to maximize compensation potential so they can afford the things that they want in life and have a nice retirement. More senior people may be looking to leave a legacy. It's appreciating those differences, not just in the people, but in the generations of people, that really makes a leader tune into the community that they lead and how to get the most potential out of it, because it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of an issue. Work is complicated. How much I'm paid is usually not number 1 on the list. It's like number 4 or 5 on the list when people take surveys about why they like or don't like their job. Yeah. So it's the leader's job to make all of those things, including the compensation work. But if it's just the leader's focus to compensate people, it's hard to retain people because it's often not number 1 on the list.
Right, right. And I'm sure with servant leadership, again, being something that you really keep close to your heart, you believe that leadership isn't just a title. It's not just a role that you play, right? Like, it is a way of being and a way of influencing others without having to be forceful or authoritative. So what would you say in your organization is one cultural behavior that you actively reinforce and or one that you will not tolerate?
So my field is unique in that people who sit in my seat usually develop into that role through marching through the various positions at the firm. We're an owner-operated business, and it would be very hard for somebody who hadn't walked in the shoes of all of the people along the way to take this role. So that's not unique to me. That's most people who sit in my seat started as often a young associate at the firm, which I did, and then worked their way up the ranks to get to this seat. And so for me, in this place, it really means that I'm focused on just the desire of this place to be successful and a stewardship kind of mentality that I've been here a very long time. I don't intend to ever work anywhere else. I want to take my turn in trying to put my fingerprints on the place and leave it in a better position than when I inherited it,
Right.
and do some things that are fun, challenging, and interesting along the way to put us on a path to success. But I'm not brought in from the outside by shareholders to create change and spin out divisions and build new brands. I'm really here to make this place as strong of a place and as productive a place as it can be for the owner operators who came up like me and own the business.
Absolutely. Right. And I mean, it's been around since the 1880s, right? I mean, it's in
We've done
Chicago,
this
was it?
successfully
Yeah.
for quite a while, right? The
Yes.
people whose names are on the door are long since passed, including their descendants who did work here. We don't have right now anybody who are descendants of the people whose names are on the door working here.
Yeah.
And so we feel very, very proud about the ability to continue a legacy that dates back so many years to people who aren't alive anymore.
Right. Yeah, it's incredible. Yeah, and it started in Chicago, and obviously, you still have massive offices in Chicago. So that's really, really something to be said about the legacy that this firm holds. So I'd love to switch to you a little personally, if that's okay, John. And so, one of the things that really resonated with me when we first met, your parents were teachers, right? So you kind of
Right.
came up in, a nice family, humble beginnings, but not, nothing crazy. But like you really learned a lot about having to work hard and earn your way, and what it means to to build a life for yourself while having good guidance around you. So you're a parent, you've got two children, you've got a wonderful family life. How do you stay balanced? And, especially with this massive leadership role that you do have, how are you able to balance, work and family and all of those things that matter to you, which work is a big part of that, but there's more to you than just that leadership role.
Yeah, it's tough because I like to achieve in all of those areas. And to be a well rounded person, I think for your own sanity as well as to feel like you're leaving the legacy you want, you need to balance all of those areas. And you wrote a book about this, so you know something about it. Um, what I often tell people when they ask me about this, it goes back to this story that I often tell about the professor in the class who puts big rocks in a jar and asks the students if the jar is full, and they say yes. And then he puts sand in between the rocks and he asks the class, is the jar full? And they said yes. And he said no. And now they're kind of getting on it. So then he puts water into the jar and he said, is it full now? And they don't really know how to respond at that point. He said, well, now it's full. But the reason I got as much into this glass as I did is I put the big rocks in first. If I would have put them in last, they wouldn't have fit. Would have been full of water and sand.
Yeah.
And the big rocks aren't just your work priorities. They're the priorities that you have in your life outside of work too. And you need to build that early on in your professional career and then commit to it so that you are creating a long-term career that you can sustain, because everybody can live without big rocks for a little while, but not over the long run. And what I see in a lot of younger lawyers is burnout because they just give up too much.
Mhm.
So if I remember counseling a young associate about her 8 o'clock p.m. tennis lesson on Wednesday nights that she continued to cancel because she needed to get something done by the next morning. And I asked her if she asked the supervising partner if it could be done early the next morning and if that would be acceptable. And of course, they said yes. And that let her go to her tennis every Wednesday night. And it was a huge quality of life improvement for her. And so if you take this big rock kind of approach and then you talk to the people you're working with about what you're doing and why you want to do it. Again, it was a 8 o'clock p.m. tennis lesson. It wasn't at 2 p.m. So it was reasonable to expect that you could make that most of the time. And so part of it is obviously having reasonable expectations. But if you're putting reasonable expectations into the jar and asking for cooperation with the people around you who care about you to meet those obligations, they're often more willing to cooperate than you think.
And I love how you told that story, because what comes up for me is that it's easy to make those quick choices that are fairly reactionary, where it's just like we're gonna put that aside. I don't have time for the workout. I don't have time for, dinner with a friend or to make a meal for my family. Like I have too much to do. But there's always going to be so much to do. And I mean, especially in business, there's always things
Yeah.
that need to be done. I mean, I don't know about you, but you have to decide when the workday's over, and
Right.
based on deadlines and client commitments and projects, like you have to decide that yourself. Each person has to decide that. And so
Correct.
with that, each person also has to decide what else they need to fit in order to keep themselves energized, right? To keep themselves going and to be motivated, to stay disciplined, to stay focused. And I don't know what it is, but I see this constantly, especially at, I would say, mid management to senior leadership roles. People are so quick to jump to that sort of victim mindset of
Right.
there's just not enough time,
Right.
And then I'm like,
Right.
oh, don't go there, because the moment you're there, then you're operating in deficiency.
Yes.
And it's really hard to recover from deficiency, right?
That's right. And so what people do then is they just give up and they figure it's too hard. And then they often have a deficiency in the other way, that
Yes.
they've given up the professional challenge that they found fulfilling, and they felt like there was no way to balance the two,
Yep.
which is what you get into in the book a little bit,
Yeah.
which is it's the mythical you can have it all. Well, you really can't always have it all.
Yeah.
And if you try to do multiple things, you are going to bump into stressful experiences from time to time. But life is worth living, and challenge is invigorating. And you just have to figure out a way to balance it so that it can work for you and your family and the people around you. But often, if you put your mind to it, there's a solution rather than just giving up.
Right. Absolutely. How would you say you personally navigate uncertainty or ambiguity when there's not clear or obvious answers to things that you face?
I've had to learn to live with more of that in leadership than I was comfortable with prior to this role. That's hard because I like certainty, and embracing uncertainty is part of leadership because answers don't always produce when you want them to. Sometimes they have to be developed over time, and things are rarely as grave as you think they are when you first encounter the situation, even though you might be uncertain about the solution. You have to kind of rest on your past and your ability to solve complex problems. And you've done that for however many years you've done it. Why all of a sudden would you not now be able to solve those problems, that they would be unsolvable? That's kind of the way I looked at it. And I would often tell clients before we did a deal, there's going to be two times when we think we're not going to get this done. And there's going to be two challenges that we think are going to be insurmountable. And we're going to broach those challenges with confidence that we're going to solve them and we're going to get through them. Because a lot of the things that I did were things that had never been done before. So there was always going to be a time or two when it looked impossible. But we were going to push through those challenges. And I told them that up front. So I kind of give that advice back to myself, is that a lot of times I won't know the immediate solution, but I'm going to sit with it and think it through, and I can probably come up with a solution.
That is so true. I love how you said that sometimes, initially when you're facing a complex issue, things can feel very grave. It's almost like we tend to catastrophize. We make things more
Yeah.
grandiose than they actually are, because it's just what's right in front of us, and it seems really
Right.
difficult and we don't have an answer because it's new, right?
Right.
But allowing yourself to, like you said, rest on your experience and your past and just know you're going to find a way through this. You're going to figure it out, no matter if this is something personal or professional. I mean, the professional things you're dealing with are really big, right? But people do this in their personal life all the time too. It's just, oh my gosh, it's such a big deal that, the soccer game was rescheduled. It's like,
Right.
get
Right.
over it and keep going. It's going to be
Right.
okay. Rearrange your schedule. It's not a
Yeah.
big deal, right?
That's totally correct. And what you said really resonates with me, is that some people think whenever there's flex in the schedule, the personal has to absorb and the professional can't. And yes, professional obligations are serious commitments. And when you promise something to somebody on a deadline, you got to commit to it and finish it. But some things aren't really deadlines. And sometimes it's not really mandatory, and you just have to have the judgment to know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And that's tricky, and that takes a lot of time. And you build emotional bank accounts with people. I'm a big Stephen Covey fan.
Yeah.
One of the first things I did when I started my career is take the 7 habits of highly effective people. And there's a chapter in there about emotional bank accounts.
Yeah.
And we build those up with everybody in our life. We build them up with work colleagues. We build them up with our domestic partners. We build them up with our kids.
Yeah.
And life is a constant debiting and crediting of those accounts. And that sounds very transactional. I don't mean it to be that way, because that's not how I live my life. But you have to realize that if you're constantly debiting one set of accounts to credit another set of accounts, you're going to be out of balance.
Yeah.
So you need to think that through before you take that approach.
Yeah. It's like looking at your emotional P&L, right?
Right. Good way to think about it.
I'm sure we want to be on the profit side, not the loss side of that.
Right.
Right. So what are some personal rituals? You know, I love this word and I love to talk about rituals, but what would you say are some of yours that really keep you sharp and, always managing these constant demands that you have coming at you in a way that is grounded?
So I do have lots of habits, and I won't get into all of them here, but I am fairly regimented in how I live day to day, even when I'm on the road, which is about half the time for me. So sleep is a big thing that I feel leaders have to commit to. And you don't always get 7 hours of sleep a night, but you gotta try to get that when you can, because sleep is rejuvenating. And when you start to go too many days without sleep, you lose your edge, in my opinion. And maybe that's just me, but I think sleep is underrated.
I think it's very true. And it's proven now. So I think you're onto something there.
And kind of having the same patterns about how you run your day, when you eat, when you connect to work and disconnect from work, knowing that has to be flexible too. But I try to get exercise in every day, even when I'm on the road. I try to do that. And those are just things that keep me more centered and balanced, so that I don't go out on the road and live a totally different life where I don't exercise, I overeat, and I don't sleep. That's just not going to work with the amount of time that I'm out on the road. So you hear a lot of people that are in my position who have jobs like this. When they're looking at hotels, they're just looking for a gym and a small room with a hot shower where I can turn off the lights easily and just go to sleep.
Yes.
And there was not much else that I'm looking for out of a place to stay. And so that to me is important. I try when I can to connect other things with my family, to travel so that I can see one of my kids or go with my wife or something like that, to make it feel less like I'm disconnecting from the family. And that doesn't always work. And I travel overseas a lot where that isn't possible. But within the U.S., it is possible. And sometimes I can connect through a city where I have relatives, and just try not to lose that connection point, because there's always more work to be done. You could work 24/7. You could always show up a day early. You could always leave a day late. And making those judgments is one of the hardest parts of this job, but it's one of the most important parts of it.
Yeah, and staying connected to others is so important. You're right. Discernment is a very big thing for me, and I talk a lot about discernment because I don't feel that enough people are discerning enough in their lives, and this most of the time is with themselves, right? So when you think about discernment, to me, it's about how you do manage your time and your energy, right?
Yeah.
Being discerning on what you allow in, and that can be something like, social media for 3 hours a night. And that's why
Yeah.
you're not sleeping, because
Yeah.
people do this to, the friend that constantly wants to just vent and gossip. And eventually you just realize, gosh, this is so draining. Maybe I don't need to see that friend, this week or next week. And I need to just, do something for myself. But what would you say people could learn more about when it comes to that discernment and managing their energy and their time?
Everybody knows their self, and they know what their limits are, and you just need to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
Sometimes people don't listen to themselves. They listen to too many other people.
Yes.
And discernment is listening to yourself, because you know yourself better than anybody else, and saying no when you can't do it, rather than saying yes and doing less than 100%, because you can't be 100%.
Right.
And so the at all levels of professional life, whether it's just starting out or on the back nine or even teeing off on the 18th hole, knowing your limits and staying within them is important. And I said earlier, taking risks and dealing with uncertainty, this is something different. You know your limits of what you can accomplish physically and mentally. And then within that, you can take risks and have uncertainty and sort things out, et cetera. But if you don't work well without getting a decent night of sleep, don't agree to go out after hours with everybody and get into bed at 3 a.m. If you're a night person and that doesn't bother you, but you don't get going early in the mornings, don't commit to an early breakfast meeting if you know you're going to be out till 3 a.m., the night before. It's just that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I see people that want to conform to a norm. I have a lot of respect for people who I know are being true to themselves.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what's so funny? This conversation came up yesterday in a talk with a client, and she's been traveling a lot, and she's come back to her home city, and she's like, I find it so draining when I'm here. And I said, well, let's get into that. Let's unpack that. Like, why? And she said, the long and short of what she said is that when she is in her hometown, she constantly feels like every single meeting on her calendar, most of them are in person because they're in the office, she has to be in every single one. And her calendar is being run for her. She's not running it. And I said, well, do you realize that people reschedule meetings all the time? Like,
Yeah.
They cancel them, they move them. They literally look at their schedules on Sundays and go, I'm not going to be able to fit that in on Thursday. I need to move it. And she's like, well, yeah, people do that, but I can't do that. And I'm like, why are you making yourself non-human? Because I will tell you that hundreds of millions of people are doing this constantly. So you have to start giving yourself grace to just move things around, right? Like, be discerning what doesn't fit in your calendar this week because you don't have the energy or the space for it. Now, you're going to have those obligations and responsibilities. Those you can't move, but there's plenty of other things that you can. If you really need to do that focused work, clear your calendar, figure it out, right?
Yeah. Well, we talked about that earlier. Things are more possible than you think.
Right.
And if somebody else is filling up your calendar and you're adhering to it as if it's an order from headquarters, when you're headquarters, that's probably not smart. And certainly all of us who are busy have people who run our calendars. That's not unusual. In fact, I can't imagine how it could be done any other way. But that doesn't mean that you don't ultimately control it. Block out time. Come in and say, look, I can't do Friday afternoon anymore because I have a commitment that came up. Could be a personal commitment. You don't need to tell them.
Yeah, and less is more.
People aren't going to ask, well, why did you have to reschedule the meeting? They're going to assume something came up, and they may assume something different than what really came up. You don't have to justify yourself. But you also have to be responsible. If you cancel meetings at the last minute, people are going to be frustrated because they can't reuse the hour or the half an hour that they've allocated to you. So you also have to be on top of your organizational skills and planning ahead and anticipating and being proactive. And some things can't be avoided. And there's medical issues that happen. There's personal issues that come up out of nowhere. You've got 2 kids, you know what I'm talking about. And everybody's going to give you some grace around those things.
That's so
Unless
true.
it is every single week there's some new catastrophe or disaster that couldn't be planned for. People eventually are like, well, that's more than coincidence. Nobody has an emergency a day.
Right.
But I've never seen it come to that.
No.
Frankly, I've seen people around here be incredibly gracious.
Yeah.
Even clients, when something comes up that causes a person to be unavailable. And frankly, asking people for help.
Right.
I raise this a lot with people around here. It's just because you think that you're at a certain level of the org chart doesn't mean that when there's work to be done, you can't ask somebody more senior than you to do it. And that you would expect that they'd be resentful about that. That they're just like you. They're trying to just get the work done that we need to get done to continue to keep our clients happy and develop our brand. And if you're truly too busy and the only place for the work to go is up, then the person who's above you in the org chart will probably agree to do it. And may willingly agree to do it because they care about your well-being and your ability to achieve as well as theirs. So that's sometimes missed by people who think I can only delegate down. Delegating up is a well-honed skill by many successful people. with the right parameters around it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're truly fully occupied and that's why you're pushing work up, great. If you're pushing work up so you don't have to do it because you want to do something else, that's probably not a good long-term strategy.
Right. 100%. But I do like how you talked about setting aside preconceived notions that you can't delegate up, right? If your plate is truly that full and you need help, speak up,
Right.
and
You're
that's
going
not a
to have to
problem.
delegate up to get it to work. There's no way around it.
Right. Absolutely. So, Jon, when we first met, I could tell right away that you are really big on paying it forward and you have so much empathy for human beings and for well-being and for the ways that people live their lives. And I can tell you're really trying to help people advance in life who don't necessarily all have the means to do so. And I have so much respect for you and your outlook, and clearly your leadership is top notch. So I am so thankful that you joined me on the show today and shared your perspectives with all of my listeners. Um, let's leave it with, where can people find you? And if you'd like to talk a little bit about your own podcast, that'd be great.
Yeah. So if you Google my name, it's kind of unique because I spell my name Jon, not John. So we'll start there. But if you just Google Jon Van Gorp, I don't think there's anybody else with that name in the world right now. You'll find me pretty easily there. And my email address is there. And I would certainly love to hear from you if you want to contact me. I have my own podcast called Tools of the Trade. A lot of it is just for internal use. Some of it is externally available wherever you find podcasts. You can look it up. It's on Spotify. I know that. And I came up with Tools of the Trade during the COVID years when a lot of my people were in their houses trying to practice law, which is really hard. It's a team sport. We have an apprenticeship model here where you learn from the senior people. I like to call it the medical school model: learn one, do one, teach one. And I felt like there was a real void in people learning the soft skills. Certainly technical stuff got done because it had to get done, but how to develop a brand, how to develop a client, how to deal with a sticky situation, those kinds of soft skills, it just wasn't happening as organically as I wanted to. So I put Tools of the Trade together. So mostly people who are developing their career, which is who I think are the future of this place, could listen to it and pick up some of these skills. And it's kind of evolved from there. I did it with my partner and fellow management committee member, Sally Davis, in London. So she brought a unique perspective of somebody in a different market with different ideas. And that's been great that the two of us have been able to do that together. So I really enjoyed your book, Erin. Many people who read it will understand that the things that we talked about today are really important to you. And your background has informed who you are today. And you are grateful, I know, for everything that you've been able to accomplish in the life you're able to lead. But you do it with grace, and you do it with humility, and you do it with a mindset that I want to help other people celebrate all the good things in life without having too much weigh them down and get in the way of just enjoying life, because life's for the living. And if you're not enjoying what you're doing, it's not going to get better in 6 months. It's not going to get better in a year. It's time to fix it right now.
Yeah.
And that's at least what I took away from the book.
Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. And it's, yes, that I receive that, because I am so grateful, and I do remain humble in everything that I do, because why not, right? Why not? And life is worth living. There's a saying that that goes, fear prevents life, not death. And I'm like, that is so true, right? So be scared every day, be scared for that new client, or be scared for that pitch you're walking into, or, be scared to, write the article or whatever that is. Just do it scared. Why not?
Right. I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
Totally agree with you. And embrace the uncertainty with the structure around you, your support system, family, colleagues, whatever it is, to pick you up again when things don't work out as planned. Just like when I was a kid and I was learning to ski in Colorado, I would come home and say I didn't fall. And my parents will say, well, you didn't get any better today, because you're not getting any better unless you fall. And I always have thought about that, because failure is part of improving. And if you go into anything and expecting you won't have any challenges or or failures, you're probably not going to unlock the potential that you have.
Right. Yeah. And I know you have basketball in your family, and so,
Yeah.
as do we. And, yesterday we were in this 3-on-3 tournament, and, one child lost some games and the other one won everything and won the championship. And I said, losing is just a part of the process, doesn't mean anything right now. It's just a part of what you have to experience. You got to work harder next time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, or you couldn't control that because you did your very best. And a lot of times I go back on that. That was my mom's advice. And that was my mom's advice to my dad, who was a first generation college student who didn't have parents who could give him a lot of advice on college. But he would always say that to me, that it got discouraging for him. And he was up against a lot of people who had a lot of advantages relative to him. And his mom just said, just do your best.
Yeah.
And if you do your best, you can never be criticized for how the game or whatever you're doing comes out, because you can't ask anything more from people than that.
That is so true. Just do your best. I love that. Jon, you are a wealth of wisdom. Thank you again for your time. This was a lovely, enriching conversation. You're welcome. You're welcome. And everyone, we will include where to find Jon in the show notes. So thank you for being here and for your time. As always, please rate, review, share the show, help it reach more people who will benefit from it.